Just want to welcome Jay Friedman to our segment, this next segment, TubaPeopleTV. Thanks for allowing us to talk with you, Jay.
Sure, no problem.
I was wondering, you came to the Chicago Symphony in 1962.
Yep, 62.
And prior to that, what was your first encounter with the CSO?
Well, I was a student here for 4 years, and I used to come to every concert that I could possibly sneak into or get a ticket to. So I heard the orchestra for 4 years, steady.
How do you think
Almost every concert.
So you heard them in the 50s?
Yeah.
What
Late 50s.
How do you describe how did the Chicago Symphony brass section sound or style come about? What's the
Well, I think it was Jacobs and Rehearsal on each end, like a couple of bookends, and everybody else in the middle just kind of went with the style that they had established, and it was pretty powerful.
Did you listen to the recordings, or did you just listen to them live?
Yeah, there weren't that many recordings. There were a few Reiner recordings, but it was mostly live. You know, I used to go every week. Sometimes I'd hear a concert more than once.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I went every week. I could get a ticket or sneak in, or get a comp ticket because I was in Civic at that time.
What can you describe what influence Mr. Jacobs may have had on your career as a performer?
Yeah, I never studied with him actually, but I knew a lot of people that did, and they used to tell me things about his teaching, and some of it I kind of figured out later was not really what Jake was about, because they'd always talk about the machines and and the song and wind and everything, but I kind of arrived at the same things that he arrived at, but I had to find out for myself.
Right.
Yeah, I kind of ended up with the things that he espoused about the relaxation when you're playing, about the breath, and I had to come to that myself. I knew about it, and I knew what he talked about, and I knew what people talked about. And I just came back from Europe. I did some brass concerts over there, and everybody has a different idea about the Jacobs thing, and he thinks that we're all Jacobs clones here, which is kind of misunderstood.
Yeah.
I mean, I played with Jake for 25 years, but I never studied with him, but I knew what people talked about in his lessons and things like that. So, I mean, I was well aware of the style, even though, like I say, it got perverted a lot because people would take the wrong things out of a lesson.
Right. Can you describe what it was like to play with Jake?
Yeah, well, it was the thing that I remember was the style and the sound that he got out of a huge instrument, which was so alive and it was so vocal. It was such a pure sound, and it was so clear. And that was something you could tune to, because tuba players that have big sounds, that doesn't impress me at all. Everybody's got a big sound on tuba, but is it clear? Yeah. And Jake had one of the most resonant, clear sounds I've ever heard. So it was easy to tune with him. And of course, Kleinhammer sat next to him, and he had an amazingly clear sound. So it was so easy to play soft things with them because it was such an alive sound. And that's what I would say about the Chicago Symphony Brass then. And we try to keep that style going now, although it's not the same. It was more electric in those days. Maybe less subtle, but it was more electric. There's so much life in the sound. And that's what Jacobs and Herseth did, and especially Jacobs. I don't know who started that. They both kind of arrived on the scene at the same time, and they both played that style where the sound just absolutely jumps out of the horn. And I've been trying to teach that and talk about it wherever I go.
Do you happen to remember your first concert?
Oh yeah, I remember it was with Stokowski, and we did the Glier Third Symphony, Ilya Muromets, with Stokowski, and I was playing second trombone.
Was that recorded? Was that one of those?
No,
that wasn't one of them.
No, but it should have been. Yeah, Stokowski recorded. He made a few recordings with this Russian Easter Overture, that Khachaturian Symphony with the 15 trumpets.
Yeah, yeah.
It was a riot.
What about you know, you were talking about Jake's singing style. It's one of his I guess his voice really was, he used vibrato on the tuba.
Absolutely.
And sometimes in tutti sections, not necessarily all the time, but some.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he was.
How did you
He
feel
was
about
like
that?
a singer. Most of the time, I liked it a lot, and also there's this pervasive theory that the Chicago Symphony Brass always played everything loud and long, and that's not the style at all. In fact, I don't ever remember Jake ever playing a passage that was like a really tenuto. It was always a bell tone style.
Yeah, that immediate.
Yeah,
that
where the
air,
sound jumps out of the horn and it's got a natural diminuendo on every note, and it would cut through an orchestra, and he didn't have to play that loud. And Herseth did the same thing. I remember in the old days, the whole orchestra, the whole orchestra would be blowing their brains out, especially the brass section, and Herseth, and I'm sure Jacobs, they'd be sitting there playing exactly the right dynamic to be heard above everybody else.
So
Yeah, even though
still
everybody
Herseth.
was playing as loud as they could, those two guys were so efficient on their instrument that they didn't need to play that loud, and yet they were heard all the time. And that's the hardest thing to learn.
I remember when I was in Civic, going and just listening from the podium area just during when people are warming up, and noticing that seemed like the back row when you're at the podium area wasn't in the old, before the renovation of the 90s, was not as present as it might have been up in the gallery.
Right.
Do you?
Yeah, the gallery was the loudest place in the hall.
I remember Herseth talking about this, and people were trying to explain, well, how did the Chicago Symphony Brass get so loud? And one of the things he attributed to was the fact that from the podium
couldn't hear him.
Yeah.
Right.
Has that been your experience as well?
Yeah, I mean, I've conducted from the podium, and it's a very, it's a strange sensation. The brass volume, it's kind of diffuse. It's not what we hear back there, and it's not what you hear out in the hall. And Herseth used to tell these stories with Reiner. There'd be a review where the brass was just way too loud. So Reiner would tell the brass section, I don't want to hear it, you're too loud, and this and that. And after about 3 or 4 days of rehearsal, Reiner would say, it sounds anemic, and then they'd be right back up to the old volume again.
I see.
So,
Well,
that's
is
what he
that
talked
style
about.
that you're talking, sorry, from behind the camera, Mike.
Yeah, Mike Becker.
That style that you're talking about, the immediacy of the sound, the
Yeah.
way it jumps out. Is that the style that you think is distinctive with Chicago Symphony
Oh,
brass?
absolutely. Yeah, I've never heard anybody else do that. In fact, I just did some brass concerts over in Europe, and I talked to them about this, and a few people got really excited about it and said, "That's the way we want to play." But nobody can agree on style over there, just like everywhere else. But when they heard this concept of notes jumping out of the horn and being very live, it really comes down to making a ringing sound.
Right.
Yeah, not a dead sound, and it's all the way you start notes, and it's all the way how relaxed you are in your body. You know, this old German thing where you got to play with a firm foundation. Down here, Jake really kind of cleared the air on that one, and made people realize that it's a bunch of bunk.
Mhm.
The more relaxed you are, and the more work you can do from the chin up and the embouchure, yeah,
Speed of the air.
yeah, and fast airstream out of a relaxed body.
Yeah.
And I don't think Jacobs was absolutely the first one, because I think Schlossberg was about that, and the Kleinhammer told me about a second trumpet player that used to be in the St. Louis Symphony back in the 40s, and he used to talk about the rib cage being bellows, just like Jake used to talk about also. So that's been around. It's just that it hasn't been disseminated that well until Jacobs came, and like I say, there was a lot of mistaken things that were attributed to Jake, but Jake is about ring in the sound, life in the sound, a vocal quality, and that's really
Right.
what it boils down to.
So probably students confuse, they hear the presence of the brass section
Yeah.
sound. They confuse that immediacy and that presence with being loud, when it's really not loud.
No, it's just alive.
a style that matches together.
Right.
When the
Yeah,
sound hits
if
it.
everybody does that, it's amazing.
It must have been when you
amazing sound.
when you got in the orchestra, you were quite young.
Yeah.
Did your
23.
low brass colleagues make it easy for you? Were
Yeah,
they
because I
helpful?
had studied with the principal before that, Bob Lambert, and I knew Mr. Kleinhammer. He's the one that arranged to get my trombone, which I'm still playing today, believe it or not.
Is that right?
Yeah, he went up to the music store with me and told me what to order and
Wow.
yeah, and everything. So yeah, I'm still playing the horn today.
Well, thanks so much for spending these few minutes
Sure.
with Mike and I and Puddles. And Puddles is always very careful to remind me to be a good host, and so he's directed me to bring to you a bag of genuine University of Oregon duck nuts.
Cool.
And they're dark chocolate duck
Wow.
nuts, so they're really special.
Oh, thanks. Wow, this looks fantastic.
Thank you.
All right, I'll take this home
Thanks a lot, Jay.
with me. Yeah.
It's great to see you.
Yeah, good to see you.
All right. Thanks.